real personal story here real fast, or on a personal note, a story real fast, but I'm in Vegas. And a number of months ago, and I want to call it a year ago, but I don't think it was that long. I think it was more like 7 or 8 months ago. I had a group of college teammates. And, you get real close with your teammates. You guys could relate whether it was college or whether it was high school. You never forget, it's your teammate and there's something special there. But the other side of the reality is time goes fast. I haven't seen these guys in 20 years. And let's call it 8 months ago, 8 or 9 months ago, I get contacted and they say, hey, listen, we're putting the band back together. We're going to go out to Las Vegas to the Senior Nationals, the toughest tournament in all of American wrestling. And we're going to enter something called the Master. Now, what the Masters is, real simply, is you must be 35 years old to enter, okay? So some of those younger and faster and hungrier and busier guys, some of these guys on scholarships that all they have to do is go to class and wrestle twice a day, they're not eligible. It's for a little bit of the older guys. Okay. And they're looking for a coach. I thought I was going to be asked to be on the team, the ringer of the team, if you will. No, they didn't ask me to do that. They asked me to be the coach. I said, yeah, of course. Absolutely. And, there was very little work involved. Just get organized with USA Wrestling, get your federation cards in, get your flights, get your hotels. But then we wanted to have some uniforms. We wanted, we wanted to look the part. We wanted to memorialize this and get singlets with our names on them and team names on them. And so, okay, we did the whole bit. Great. We're out here in Las Vegas. Not actually the point of my story. It's not actually the point of my story. The point of my story is today is weigh-in day. So on weight cutting day, it doesn't matter if you're in the Masters or you're in the seniors or you're in the juniors or you're in the cadets. If you got to cut weight, it is not a fun experience. So I got 6 guys and they all had to get a few pounds off. And one of the things, and this works for me as well, but one of the things when I'm cutting weight, whether I'm in the sauna or I'm in the bath, or if you're doing one of those salt baths or you're on the treadmill, whatever the circumstance might be, you're hurting. And it's very nice to have somebody talk to you for whatever reason, whether it's just the company, whether it's just to listen, but make sure you hear what I said. It's nice to have somebody talk to you, not to have somebody to talk to. You do not want to have a conversation. You're hurting. You're low on energy. Your mouth is dry. Your mind isn't working as fast, but your ears are there. And if somebody can just visit with you and tell you some stories, put some stories together, all of a sudden those minutes go by pretty fast. So this was a situation today. I had 6 guys and I start telling them some stories. And I get done and we get to the weigh-ins and we come out and Matt Powell turns to me and says, hey, you got to tell the stories on your podcast. Those are good stories. I really appreciate them. You helped me to make weight, but you need to tell them. And I thought, well, what the hell? Maybe I will tell them, because one of them has to do with an MMA fighter. Now, guys, you might have been reading about this, but I need to put this in perspective for you. I live in West Linn, Oregon. I went to school at the University of Oregon, which is in a city called Eugene. That is 2 hours from my front door, okay? So when I was pursuing my dream of being a mixed martial artist and making it to be a professional mixed martial artist, it's very tough to get into the UFC at that time. Now, I can't even tell you Bellator. I can't tell you Strikeforce. I can't tell you the Professional Fight League or the World Series of Fighting or Elite XC or anything in between. They didn't even exist. I couldn't even tell you the WEC. I'm talking about the year 2001 when I graduated and was kind of in some of my athletic prime, coming right out of, college and a Division I program. So you're trying to get into the UFC, and all of a sudden I'm watching a UFC one day, and a guy comes out to fight named Geralds out of Eugene, Oregon. Now, this time I'm living back in West Linn. I'm going, wait, out of Eugene, Oregon? I lived there for 5 years. We don't even have an MMA gym in Eugene, Oregon. I was far and away the baddest dude in Eugene, Oregon. Portland, okay, now we might have to have a conversation. In Eugene, Oregon, this guy fighting out of Eugene. Okay, cool, I'm going to cheer for this guy. But I'm still at a loss. I don't know where he would have prepared or trained or where he came from or how we didn't cross paths down there. Either way, he goes out and fights. Fights a guy named Josh Thompson. Now, not for nothing and not to embarrass Gerald Strebent is his name. Not to embarrass Gerald in the least, but guys, to tell you the story the way it happened. Josh Thompson threw a punch that missed by a Texas mile, and Gerald Strieben collapsed to the canvas as though he was unconscious. That punch had more air in it than popcorn. And when they replayed it on the screen, and you can clearly see the punch never lands. So the interviewer at the time says to Josh Thompson, tell us about the punch. And Josh Thompson's watching it on the big screen, and he's like, man, this isn't on me. And he simply says live into the pay-per-view audience camera, it missed. He tells the truth, it missed. So how's that going to work at the UFC? You fall unconscious to a punch that never landed. You're not fighting in the UFC anymore. Okay, great. This is just the story, and I'm not kicking. I'm just telling you guys what happened. So a number of years later, I would say roughly 10, that would take us somewhere around 2011, 2012. Gerald is still fighting, and he's getting ready to fight in England. And he comes up to Portland, and he trains with us for a week. I would tell you, he was a hell of a nice guy. And I want to say he was a brown belt at that time under Eddie Bravo. I could be wrong, and he was black. But I knew the first day I trained with him, and he was going to train with us for a week, then he was going to get on an airplane, fly out to England, be there for a week, and then fight the following week. I knew within 10 minutes of the first time I trained with him, there is zero chance he gets on that airplane. And there is even less of a chance that he's fighting in England or anywhere else in 2 weeks. I just knew it. Well, sure enough, he came in every day. He was a hell of a nice guy, a good enough partner. And sure enough, he did not get on that airplane, and he did not go out to England. Okay, great. That ends my story and my relationship with Gerald Strieben. Well, not so fast. I put on shows at the Roseland Theater out here in Portland. And one day, I'm not at the show. And we've had well over 100 events, and I don't ever miss. I missed a show. And I get a phone call from my mother. And she says, look, there was a fight, and it was ugly, and it involved Mike. Now, Mike is a 68-year-old man who actually, with his bare hands, built the cage. So every show that we have, Mike comes in and puts that cage together, then he operates the door, right? Somebody's got to open the door in between rounds. Somebody's got to open the door, and the fighter's they got to close it, and then they got to properly secure it. It's Mike. That is his baby. He doesn't let anybody else do it. Nobody's ever touched that cage but him, and everybody knows Mike's cage, Mike's rules. Somewhere Mike, 68-year-old Mike, gets in a fight with somebody, and Mike wins. Mike wins the fight. That's the good news, and then it gets broken up. Well, I come to find out it was against Gerald Strieben. And I'm scratching my head, go, wait a minute. This guy was a Marine. This guy's 38 years old. This guy fought in the UFC. This guy's got a black belt under Eddie Bravo. What do you mean Mike beat him? Yeah, Mike won the fight. It was real quick, but Mike got on top and security stepped in and broke it up. Okay, fine. But if you cross Mike, you are never coming back in that building. So they escort Gerald out of the building, and Gerald says, hey, I'll go, but I got a bag downstairs. Now, this is a 3-story building. So security has to go down 3 stories, 3 floors to find Gerald's bag, of which they find exactly what it looked like, exactly where Gerald said it was. Problem, it was unzipped, it was wide open, and right on top is a locked and loaded .45 Magnum. Gerald has now got a lifetime ban, okay? And he was this close to going to jail. But the owner of the venue didn't want that heat. So he just goes, beat it and don't come back. And Gerald did have a carry permit. I mean, he was a Marine. He did everything right. He had the carry permit. But why in the hell he brought a .45 into the Roseland, cocked, locked, and loaded, and why he would leave that in a bag, unattended, 3 floors, I have no idea. The guy, when I met him and what I knew about him, he was a very nice guy. The fight game wasn't for him, but he was a solidly decent person. He served the country. This is all I know about him. Okay, let's chalk it up to Gerald made a mistake and move on. Move on with our lives. That's where I think this story is going to conclude, and I now know that you won't see Gerald at the fights anymore, and okay. No, not so fast, because 2 weeks later, Gerald ends up in some kind of a traffic altercation in Eugene at 2 in the afternoon, which is relevant to the story because now you're talking about broad daylight. He gets out of his car. The other guy gets out of his car. The guy's daughter stays in the car. This guy's in his late 50s. Again, Gerald, a black belt, a UFC veteran, a Marine, somewhere decides he's scared that right here in broad daylight, with a nearly 60-year-old man yelling whatever he yelled in traffic. Gerald returns to his car, gets the very same .45 caliber, and puts one in the guy. Guy dies. Gerald gets locked up. Now, if I'm on that jury, even if I like Gerald, Gerald's going to have to sit. I just can't let that slide. This guy is unarmed in broad daylight. He is twice your age and untrained, and you are a Marine cage-fighting black belt. I can't let it go. You got to sit. So Gerald sits. Gerald then gets out. Okay, he does like 5 years of like an 8-year bid because he claims self-defense. And that's a really tough one. That's a really tough one to go, look, this guy shouted at me and I was scared. So I retreated to my car, got a weapon, drew down. I mean, you went back to the car. How about you get in the car, shut the door, put it in drive and leave? Wasn't a whole lot of room there, but there was enough room that I think he got like 7.5 to 8 years and only had to serve 5. Okay, great. Gerald gets out. Within 10 months, Gerald is back in handcuffs because in the meanwhile of being released, he went and started teaching classes at the 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu gym in Eugene, Oregon, and somewhere got handsy with an underage student. So Gerald's locked back up, but the whole reason I brought this story up and the whole reason I asked Matt Powell about it is because Matt currently lives in Eugene, and even though us MMA fans have been reading about this, Bloody Elbow, MMA Made It, they've been doing articles on this from the beginning. Gerald's in sentencing. Gerald's in trial. Gerald's locked up and he's going back in. Okay. But I was asking Matt about it because I was just wondering if this was big news in Eugene where he currently lives, and he said, yeah, it is. He said, I didn't know him for any of the reasons you just said about the Roseland and the 45 and the, I don't know, UFC and Marine. I didn't know any of that. But yes, he's been the front page of our paper and on our local news every single night for about 4 months now because of the trial and everything that he was going through. So I gave him the backstory. I told him about, what happened in our promotion. I told him about what happened with the popcorn punch with Josh Thompson. And he thought it was a good story. And he told me I should pass it on to you guys. But I had one more. Because we're at the weigh-ins for the U.S. Open. Now, this is more of a philosophical. Let me tell you guys what happened, and then let me tell you the philosophy behind it. A number of years ago, it would have been the year 2000. And the reason I know it was the year 2000 is it was Olympic year, which qualified, this very tournament, the U.S. Open, qualifies you for the final Olympic wrestle-off. And should you win the U.S. Open, not only do you qualify, but should you win it, you sit out of the mini-tournament. They have to go through a mini tournament, meaning the top 8 guys. Whoever wins that then draws in to you. You get to sit fresh, and then you go 2 out of 3. So whoever it is that wins that is going to be exhausted and tired and beat up on before he gets to you. That is your reward, and that is your incentive for showing up and conquering the U.S. Open in an Olympic year, per the rules as they were back then. Okay, great. Matt Lindland. The scales in wrestling, I should add, are extremely regulated and regimented. And I'll tell you what I mean. Weigh-ins start promptly at 4 o'clock. They put a great big clock in the weigh-in room. It does not matter how many people are there. It does not matter how many officials are ready. Nobody will get on that scale until the second hand exactly hits 12. And that clock exactly moves to 4. Now, that clock will continue to run, and you have exactly 30 minutes to conclude the weigh-ins. So you could miss weight. You could miss weight again. You could miss it again. It's not like MMA, where you get 2 shots over the course of the next 2 hours to cut the weight. You have 30 minutes. You could try 10 times. You could try 20 times. You could try no more times and give up right then. But at 4:30, okay, just like an Ironman competition, they will pack up the table and the equipment, and they will walk out. It is over. Period. Does not matter who you are. Matt Lindland happened to be the number 1 guy in the country. Matt Lindland comes into that weigh-in for his second attempt at 4:29 and 30 seconds. Now, new rule was implemented that year. You must weigh in a singlet. You don't have to have briefs on underneath. You don't have to have a jock strap. You must have a singlet. You used to be able to weigh in naked. Should it come down to that, you could do that. For whatever reason, they changed that rule. You have to have a singlet on. So Matt, 30 seconds left. Okay. He gets on the scale. He misses weight. He gets off the scale. He now has 20 seconds left. Joe Warren happened to be standing right there. Joe Warren was 3 weight classes less than Matt Lindland, which meant he was a much smaller guy than Matt Lindland, which meant he has a much smaller and lighter singlet than Matt Lindland. And Matt says, give me your singlet. 20 seconds left and ticking. Joe gives him the singlet. Matt gets on the scale. There's 8 seconds left, and he is broken. He is done, and he says it. His coach, Anatoly Petrolov, is standing right there. I'm standing right there listening. And Matt Lindland says, I'm done. I don't care what happens. I don't care if I need to go up a weight. I am done. 1 second left. He happened to be on weight. He got off the scale. Went into the tournament, the number 1 seed. Recovered by the next day. Made the finals. Won that. Sat out the mini tournament. Went on to the Olympic Games and got a silver medal. So it is very interesting, though, and I happened to be there to observe this when he broke. Look, anybody that breaks doesn't make weight. Matt Lindland broke, but he happened to be on weight. And frankly, look at all the circumstances that happened. Had Joe Warren not been standing there, or some other athlete who could act that quickly, rip a singlet off, throw it to Matt, because they knew the circumstance, they knew the clock was ticking down, they happened to be 3 weight classes lower. This is a digital scale. It doesn't just weigh to the 10th, it weighs to the gram. And he was 0.0. 0.0 with 1 second on the official clock that would have scratched him. Went on to be an Olympic silver medalist. Everything Matt did in MMA was based around that Olympic medal. Just getting his opportunity. Now, I think Matt would have got it another way. I will concede to that. But at the time he got it, Jeff Blatnick, who was a fellow Olympian and Olympic medalist, was the commissioner of the UFC, and Jeff Blatnick personally saw to it that Matt Lindland was given the opportunity. And he took that all the way to title fights. He took that all the way to a consensus ranking of number 1. He's now the highest rated coach in the United States of America. There is no coach with a higher ranking than Matt Lindland, and it's all because of that Olympic medal. 1 gram or 1 second would have changed the entire trajectory of Matt. And quite frankly, most of you are listening and go, wow, what an amazing story. Thank goodness Joe was there. Thank goodness Matt got that singlet on so fast. Thank goodness he happened to make weight in the second hand round. But you know what, guys? You all have stories like that too. All of us do. Whether it's the girl you're dating or the person you're married to now, how you met them. You met them at a restaurant, but you weren't even going to go that night. Or you always go to the restaurant that night, but the other person wasn't supposed to be there. Whatever it could be. Happenstance and circumstance, missteps, accidents and mistakes and luck. That's what life's all about. You could tell those stories 100 times about I wouldn't even be here now if this hadn't happened. And I love the guys that always rework the stories, right? I see guys do this in business all the time. Nobody's more guilty of this than business. If you ever want to find out how some guy made it, but he went and wrote a book, read his book, enjoy the entertainment, and just know that was a whole bunch of misinformation. Guys do this in business all the time. They make missteps. They make suckers moves. And 5 other things happened. 5 other intangible variables happened, and their suckers move, bad idea, works out. I see it all the time. But then they rework the story when they try to tell it. They rework the story chapter after chapter, page after page in their best-selling book that they put out and sell it on Amazon right now about how they knew. They predicted the psychology of the customer. They predicted the atmosphere of the market. No, you didn't. You were no different than anybody else. You threw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall and you saw what stuck. And then when it did stuck, you came back, reworked the story, and took the credit for it.